The cameras had been rolling for 3 hours when Steve Harvey did something that had never happened in the history of Family Feud. He stopped everything, walked off his mark, and asked a question that would change television forever. David, are you telling me you've been engaged for 15 years? What started as a routine Tuesday afternoon taping in Atlanta became the most extraordinary wedding ceremony ever broadcast, proving that sometimes the most beautiful moments happen when you throw away the script and follow your heart. The Gonzalez family had driven 18 hours from El Paso, Texas, in a borrowed minivan that barely made it past the Louisiana state line. Maria Gonzalez, 34, sat in the passenger seat, clutching a worn photo of her late mother, while her fiancé David Chen navigated another highway detour. In the back seat, Maria's 3 children from her first marriage buzzed with excitement about being on television, unaware that their presence on that stage would create a moment that millions would remember forever. David Chen wasn't supposed to be there. Family Feud typically required family members by blood or marriage, but Maria had convinced the producers that David had been more of a father to her children than their biological father ever was. 15 years together, 15 years of raising kids that weren't biologically his, 15 years of love without the legal commitment they'd dreamed of since the day they met in the emergency room, where Maria worked as a night shift nurse. The backstory nobody in the studio knew was that Maria and David had been planning their wedding since 2008. They'd saved money, booked venues, sent invitations, and twice had to cancel everything when life intervened. First, when Maria's mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and every dollar went to medical bills. Second, when David lost his construction job during the recession, and they nearly lost their apartment. By the time they could afford to think about a wedding again, it felt like they'd missed their moment. But Maria's mother, Elena Gonzalez, had done something before she died that no one knew about except the woman at the bridal shop in downtown El Paso. 3 weeks before her final trip to the hospital, Elena had used her last disability check to put a wedding dress on layaway. Not just any dress, but the one Maria had tried on years earlier and called perfect before reluctantly putting it back when they saw the price tag. Elena had made the bridal shop owner promise not to tell Maria until the right moment came along. That right moment was supposed to be their Family Feud appearance. Elena had encouraged them to apply for the show, saying the prize money could finally pay for their wedding. Misha, she had whispered to Maria during one of her final lucid moments. Some dreams are worth waiting for, but not forever. Promise me you won't wait forever. Maria had promised, but Elena died 2 weeks later, and the wedding plans died with her. Standing at the podium that afternoon, facing off against the Washington family from Seattle, Maria felt her mother's presence in the studio lights. The game had started routinely enough. Steve worked his magic with both families, finding the humor and heart in their answers, creating those moments of connection that made Family Feud appointment television for millions of viewers. The Gonzalez family was trailing by 40 points going into the 4th round when everything changed. The category was things that make a house feel like home, and it was David's turn at the podium. He stepped forward with the quiet confidence he'd developed over 15 years of being the man Maria could count on, the father her children needed, the partner who stayed when staying got difficult. Survey says, Steve announced with his trademark enthusiasm, name something that makes a house feel like home. David looked at the board, then at Maria, then back at Steve. Family traditions, he said simply. Family traditions. Steve repeated. Survey says. The answer was there, number 4 on the board. The Gonzalez family celebrated, but David hadn't moved from the podium. Something in his expression had changed, and Steve, after decades of reading contestants, noticed immediately. That's a good answer, David, Steve said, approaching the podium. Family traditions. Y'all got some good traditions? David's composure cracked slightly. We do, Steve. We've got Christmas mornings and birthday parties and Sunday dinners. We've got everything a family needs except, he paused, his voice catching, except the one tradition we've been trying to start for 15 years. The studio audience sensed something shifting in the atmosphere. This wasn't typical game show banter anymore. Steve set down his cards and stepped closer. What tradition is that, David? Getting married, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've been engaged for 15 years, Steve. 15 years. And every time we try to make it happen, life gets in the way. Medical bills, job losses, family emergencies. We keep saying next year, but next year never comes." The cameras caught Maria's face in the family section. Tears had started streaming down her cheeks, but she was trying to smile for the children who didn't understand why everyone had gotten so quiet so suddenly. Steve Harvey had hosted thousands of episodes and heard every kind of story, but something about David's quiet desperation and Maria's brave tears hit him differently. This wasn't about money or prizes or television ratings. This was about two people who had done everything marriage required except sign the papers. "David," Steve said, his voice gentler now, "tell me about Maria." And David did. Right there on national television, with millions watching, he talked about meeting Maria during the worst night of his life when his mother had a heart attack. How Maria had been the nurse who stayed past her shift to sit with his family in the waiting room. How she'd held his hand when the doctors delivered bad news, and how he'd known, even in that moment of grief, that he wanted to hold her hand for the rest of his life. He talked about proposing with a ring they couldn't afford, in an apartment they could barely pay for, with 3 kids who needed so much more than 2 working-class adults could provide. He talked about choosing love anyway, about building a family on hope and commitment, and the quiet promise that someday when things got easier, they'd make it official. "We've been married in every way that matters for 15 years, David said. "We've raised children together, bought a house together, survived cancer scares and job losses, and family deaths. We've been through everything married people go through. We just never had the ceremony." The studio had fallen completely silent. Steve looked at Maria, still standing with her family, tears flowing freely now. He looked at the Washington family, their competitors who were also emotional. He looked at the producers in the booth, at the crew members who had stopped working to listen, at the audience members who were reaching for tissue. "Maria," Steve called out, "come over here." Maria walked to the center of the stage, where David was waiting. They stood together, holding hands, in front of Steve Harvey and 300 strangers who had somehow become witnesses to something sacred. 15 years, Steve repeated, more to himself than to them. "You know what that tells me? That tells me you two already know what marriage is about. You've been living it. You've been proving it. You've been showing those kids what real commitment looks like." He paused, looking at both of them, then made a decision that would create television history. "I'll tell you what we're going to do," Steve announced, turning to address the entire studio. "We're going to stop this game right here, right now. Because sometimes, just sometimes, something more important than Family Feud happens in this studio." The audience began to murmur, unsure what was happening. Steve walked to the Washington family. "Washington family, would you mind if we did something completely different here today?" Marcus Washington, the family patriarch, stepped forward without hesitation. "Steve, whatever these folks need, we're here for it." Steve nodded and turned back to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got 2 people here who have been committed to each other for 15 years. They've raised children together, built a life together, proven their love in every way except one. They've never had their wedding day." The crowd began to understand where this was going. Steve continued, his voice growing stronger and more certain with each word. "Now, I can't marry people, I'm not ordained, and this isn't a church. But what I can do is give Maria and David something they've been waiting for, a moment, a celebration, a chance for their family and friends and complete strangers to witness their commitment." He looked directly into the main camera. "Maria, David, would you like to have your wedding celebration right here, right now, on Family Feud?" Maria gasped, bringing her hands to her mouth. David's eyes widened in disbelief. After a moment that seemed to last forever, they both nodded. What happened next was pure television magic, unrehearsed and unprecedented. Steve called for the producers to cut the formal taping and start recording something entirely different. The Washington family joined the Gonzalez family on stage. Audience members stood up and began forming an impromptu processional aisle down the center of the studio. Steve took off his signature suit jacket and handed it to David. "Every groom needs a jacket for his wedding day," he said. "This one's been lucky for me for 15 years. Maybe it'll be lucky for you too." But the moment that would be replayed millions of times came when Steve turned to the audience and made an announcement that silenced the entire studio. 15 years ago, Maria's mother bought a wedding dress. It's been waiting at a bridal shop in El Paso this whole time, paid for but never picked up. Elena Gonzalez knew this day would come, even if she couldn't be here to see it. Maria collapsed. Not dramatically, not for show, but the way people collapse when the weight of love and loss and hope becomes too much to carry standing up. David caught her, and Steve caught them both. "How did you know?" Maria whispered. "Because," Steve said, "mothers always know. And sometimes, when the universe needs to make something right, it sends people like your mama's spirit to make sure love wins." The studio erupted, not with applause but with joy. Pure, uncontainable joy. Audience members were crying, hugging strangers, calling out congratulations. The Washington family started singing, and soon the entire studio joined in. Steve called for someone to contact the bridal shop in El Paso. Within an hour, they had Elena's wedding dress on a flight to Atlanta. By evening, they had transformed the Family Feud studio into something that had never existed before, a television wedding chapel. The ceremony itself was unlike anything ever broadcast. Steve officiated, using his platform not as a game show host, but as a minister of love. The Washington family served as honorary wedding party. The studio audience became wedding guests. Cameramen and producers and sound technicians stopped working and started celebrating. David and Maria exchanged vows they wrote on Family Feud answer cards. They promised to love each other through medical bills and job losses, through raising children and growing older, through everything they'd already survived and everything yet to come. When Steve pronounced them husband and wife in the eyes of everyone who matters, the studio exploded in celebration. Confetti fell, music played, and for 20 minutes, Family Feud became the most joyful place on television. The reception continued for hours after the cameras stopped rolling. The Washington family and the Gonzalez family exchanged contact information and promised to stay in touch. Audience members shared their own love stories and relationship struggles. Steve Harvey, still wearing his shirt sleeves because his jacket was now part of David's wedding outfit, worked the room like the best wedding host ever. 6 months later, when the episode finally aired, it broke every viewership record in Family Feud history. The response was overwhelming. Tens of thousands of emails and social media posts from viewers sharing their own relationship stories, their own struggles with timing and money, and life getting in the way of love. But more importantly, the episode sparked something unexpected. Couples across the country began reaching out to share their own waiting to get married stories. Steve Harvey's production company started receiving requests from couples who had been engaged for years but couldn't afford their dream wedding. This led to the creation of the Elena Gonzalez Foundation, named for Maria's mother, which helps couples in financial hardship achieve their wedding dreams. To date, the foundation has sponsored over 300 weddings for couples who proved their commitment through years of partnership before they could afford the ceremony. Maria and David Chen Gonzalez, they hyphenated their names, now live in a modest house in El Paso with their 3 children, who love telling people that their parents got married on television. David still works construction, Maria still nurses the night shift, and they're still the same couple who chose love when love wasn't easy. The wedding dress Elena bought is now on permanent display at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta, alongside a photo of Maria wearing it on her wedding day and a plaque that reads, "Some dreams are worth waiting for, but not forever." Steve Harvey keeps a photo from that day in his dressing room, not because it was great television, but because it reminded him why he does what he does. That day, he said in later interviews, "We stopped being entertainers and started being human beings." Maria and David didn't need a game show, they needed a community. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, your job gives you the chance to be part of something bigger than ratings. The jacket Steve gave David still hangs in their bedroom closet, next to Maria's wedding dress. David wore it to his daughter's high school graduation, to his son's wedding, and to every anniversary dinner they've shared since that extraordinary Tuesday in Atlanta. Every year on their anniversary, Maria and David receive a video message from Steve Harvey, checking in, sharing updates from his own family, maintaining the connection that started with a game show question and became a lifelong friendship. The Washington family, who could have been bitter about having their Family Feud experience interrupted, became some of Maria and David's closest friends. They visit Texas every summer, and the Gonzalez-Chens travel to Seattle every Christmas. What started as competition became family. The episode also changed how Family Feud approaches contestant stories. Producers now spend more time learning about the families before taping, understanding that sometimes the most important stories are the ones that don't fit the game format. Steve Harvey encourages contestants to share what matters to them, knowing that occasionally television can become the platform for something more meaningful than entertainment. Maria still works the night shift at the same hospital where she met David. But now, when other nurses complain about working holidays or missing family time, Maria tells them about the night shift that led to 15 years of love and a wedding on national television. Sometimes, she says, the best things happen when you're not looking for them. David framed the Family Feud answer card, where he wrote family traditions, and hung it in their kitchen, next to their marriage certificate and a photo of Elena Gonzalez. Their tradition finally complete, their family finally official, their love story finally having the celebration it deserved. That Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta proved something that reality television had forgotten. Authentic emotion creates better content than any script ever could. When Steve Harvey chose to stop the game and start a wedding, he created a moment that transcended entertainment and became inspiration. The lesson from that day isn't about television, or ratings, or viral content. It's about recognizing when life offers you the chance to choose love over protocols, celebration over competition, humanity over showmanship. Because sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen when ordinary people get the opportunity to make their dreams come true in front of people who care enough to witness them.